Hi again, Mark here from Talking Bass. Now, every now and then I get comments on some of my scale, chord tone or theory lessons asking how it all relates to metal bass lines and riffs. So in this lesson I'm going to give you a few tips on how to analyse and create bass lines in some heavier styles and look at whether or not all of this scale and harmony stuff even applies. So if we look back a little to the late 60s and early 70s, to the foundation of heavy rock and metal styles, you get bands like Deep Purple, Zeppelin and especially Black Sabbath writing some of the heavy riffs that would set everything in motion, leading to the kind of technical death metal stuff that we get today. Now back in those days, a lot of the sound was coming from a raw bluesy influence. Crunchy, overdriven and distorted guitars would play riffs often based on a minor pentatonic scale to give us that kind of rock vibe. Perfect example would be something like Black Knight by Deep Purple. That riff almost single-handedly made me want to become a rock musician. It grooves, it swings, it's catchy and it's got a deep and dirty vibe. Yes, a lot of it is down to the rhythm and the tone, but the notes in there, that open and very singable minor pentatonic line, has a lot to do with it, and you'll find that minor pentatonic scale is used as the basis for so many rock and metal songs. Black Knight is based on an E minor pentatonic scale. So we've got E, G, A, B, D, and then up to the E. So you can really hear that scale in there in the riff. Now, the minor pentatonic scale is very common, but you'll also find a lot of riffs of that era adding notes in there for a little flavour. The blues scale adds a chromatic note between the 4th and the 5th degree, so on the E minor pentatonic there, we'd add the A sharp between the A and the B. And remember what I said, a lot of those older rock tunes were coming from a heavy blues influence. So a famous and obvious example you probably all already know would be Sunshine of Your Love by Cream. So there we're using a D blues scale. It's a D minor pentatonic, but we've got that chromatic note there between the A and the G. A flat, G. So. Now, obviously, Sunshine of Your Love is not really what you'd call metal, in the modern sense, but it does have that same raw sound, that raw guitar sound that would set those wheels in motion. Now, as well as the common minor blues scale, you might also get some chromatic notes elsewhere in there, joining up those notes of the minor pentatonic. Black Dog by Led Zeppelin is a really obvious example. Okay, so there we're in an A minor pentatonic, but we have the G, G sharp, A there. We've got the chromatic passing note between the 7th and the root there. Okay, so it's A minor pentatonic and we're just adding that note between the flat 7 and the root note. And again, it gives us that bluesy flavour. Now, that minor pentatonic and bluesy vibe has been present in metal forever, but I'm really working up towards a different way of looking at riffs, as you'll see in a second. So the next step is to look at a few more additions to that minor pentatonic. Now, I say minor pentatonic because metal is generally minor in sound, It's usually hard-hitting and straight to the point, and often based on less than, frilly lyrical content. A natural minor scale sounds like this. Okay, so there we have E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, and E. So we've got the same notes as the E minor pentatonic, but we've just got the addition of the major second and the minor sixth. So we've got the F sharp in there, and then we've got that minor sixth in there. Again, a very dark kind of interval in there. So minor pentatonic, natural minor. So the 2nd and the 6th are our key notes in looking for this minor scale in metal, and a lot of early metal tunes work around that basic pentatonic framework with the addition of just the 2nd in there. Black Sabbath did this a lot, and it adds a certain darkness that you can't get with the basic minor pentatonic. N.I.B. by Sabbath is a perfect example. So in that riff, it's all pretty minor pentatonic. and blues scale bass, but we have this G down to the F sharp. That F sharp in there, that gives it that natural minor vibe. Iron Man is another example of that natural minor. So we're in E minor for this, but we're starting on the B, the fifth. So it sounds like this. So all natural minor there. We start on the B, we come up to the D, so that's the seventh, then up to the root note, the E, and then we have this. The same notes that we had there in N.I.B, so that G down to the F sharp, and that gives it more of that dark flavour rather than the bluesy minor pentatonic and blues scale. If you want another obvious minor riff from a little later, Phantom of the Opera by Iron Maiden works around an E natural minor scale. So the opening riff sounds like this. Okay, so again it's E natural minor, but we're starting on the second and leading into that minor third. And then we move up to the B and the C there, so that's going to be our fifth to the minor sixth. Then we come down that G major triad. Then C, B, down to the G, F sharp, G, A, and down to the B. So that's all working around an E minor key, really, using the E natural minor scale. So you're probably getting a little bit of an idea here as to how scales were implemented in those earlier days of rock and metal. We had the minor pentatonic scales and then the full-blown minor scales for a little bit more darkness. But how did this eventually transform into the more chromatic riffs of later thrash and death metal riffs? Well, the key here is to look at intervals, not scales. As I mentioned with the natural minor scale, it's all about the minor intervals in there that give us that darker sound. We've got the minor third, the minor sixth, and the minor seventh. But we also have intervals like the minor second and the diminished fifth, and they are equally, if not more, dark. Now, it's true that there are modes like the Phrygian and the Locrian that contain those intervals, but I have to say that the majority of metal tunes don't really operate in a modal fashion, even if they do appear that way. General functional harmony is not a big concern in the world of heavy metal, and modal harmony is even further down the pecking order. The most common chord in rock and heavy metal is the power chord. You know, a root and a fifth, and that tends to be shifted around what can seem like a scale based on the root note of the chord, but there's no real attention paid to the fifth. As an example, if we take an E Locrian scale, that scale has the root notes, it has our minor second, minor third, perfect fourth, then the diminished fifth, that evil sound there, then minor sixth and minor seventh. So it's all dark intervals in there. But if I was to make up a riff based on that scale, or work around in that scale using, let's say, a power chord, that power chord is going to have a root and a perfect fifth in it right at the start on the root note. So that is going to, that's outside of the Locrian scale. So we're not actually using the Locrian scale. We might be using it for our root movement, but that fifth in there, that's outside of the Locrian. So we're not really working in a true modal sense. We're not using that mode as our palette for creating, a set of chords or anything like that. So we're looking at using intervals for intervals' sake, for the sound of them. So let's look at a popular riff from Master of Puppets by Metallica. Okay, very, very popular riff there that you probably already know. And let's have a look at the notes that we've got in there, what intervals we're using. Well, we're starting on that E there, the open E, and then we're moving up to this F. So we instantly have this minor second in there, that very dark interval. Now, are we playing in a Phrygian or a Locrian mode? No, we're not, as you'll see as we work through the rest of the notes. So we've got E, F, then up to the B. So we've now got a diminished fifth between the F and the B. Again, a very emotive interval, a very dark interval. Okay? Then we have the same move, E to F, and then the C. Okay? And then the same again, but up to the C sharp. So really what we've got is this little ascending line. B, C, C sharp. And then it comes back down. So really, we're just looking at a line, just a chromatic line, B, C, C sharp, C. So that's what we get that sense of momentum and progression from. Yes, we're kind of in E, E minor of some kind. It's got a kind of minor sound, a darker sound, but really, it's just about the intervals in there. We've got that minor second giving us that dark sound, and then diminished fifth working up to that minor sixth and back with that little move of the C joining them up. So really, it's just about the intervals in there. And then after that, we've got that little, the little minor move there. And yes, that looks more like a minor scale. We've got G, F sharp leading down to the E. And that's the only part of that really looks like a minor scale. But like I said, we're just looking at it from an interval perspective. That if we were to take all of the notes in there and think, okay, well, what kind of scale does that create? We've got this really strange set of notes. It's not about a scale. It's just about the intervals in there. They are the building blocks. Another line that shows this kind of interval writing in a thrash setting is the opening bass riff from the tune Caught in a Mosh by Anthrax, which sounds like this. Now, on the face of it, this almost looks like a scalar line. We start by ascending up the E string with E, F, and G, which kind of looks like an E Frisian or E Locrian scale. So maybe it's going to be modal, but then it takes a chromatic turn and just works up through each fret in turn as far as the C. So we're just working chromatically, or fret by fret, up that string. And then on the second time round, we just come down the last few notes. So the C, B, down to the B flat, okay, which just so happens lands us on that nice, the diminished fifth at the end there. So again, we're not really looking at a scale at all. We're just looking at the intervals working up that string, kind of working off an E pedal point, which kind of reaffirms the key, if you want to call it that, of E, kind of minor. So again, we've got what really amounts to just a bunch of cool sounding intervals working off that open E. Nothing more, nothing less. We've got that good old minor second in there. Then the G, which gives us that general kind of minor vibe, and the rest of the chromatics there give it an almost, old school blues or Motown kind of vibe, or, dare I say it, it's almost a walking bass line. The verse riff also uses intervals in the same way, but with a little more brutality. So we have the E there as our main pedal point, and then the other notes outline those dark emotive intervals of the fifth to the minor sixth, the minor second to the root, and then the major seventh to the root. Now in a major context, that major seventh would be kind of bittersweet, but in a minor key like this filled with minor seconds, it's a bit more hostile than Little House on the Prairie. So finally, let's look at another doom-laden riff from the kings of all things thrash, Slayer. This is the opening guitar riff to the tune South of Heaven. Now even though I'm playing the guitar line, all of this applies equally to bass line creation and analysis, so it's just that you can hear it a little better. So the riff sounds like this. So here, once again, we're in the key of kind of E minor, although Slayer detuned to E flat, so it's actually E flat kind of minor. So it starts out with a pretty definite E minor line. So we're working up there, E, E, then we've got the B to the C, which is the fifth leading up to the minor sixth, so we've got that minor sixth in there, and up to the octave of the E there. So that's all very E minor. But then we start to descend with this kind of creepy spider walk chromatically down from the E and the C. So down to the major seventh there, then descend chromatically on the D string down to the B, then chromatically again down to the D on the seventh fret of the G string. Then we hit that B flat there, the diminished fifth at the, what's that, 8th fret of the D string. And then we come down chromatically again, D down to the C sharp. So it's all a chromatic descent. Now, again, we're not using a scale of any type there, we're just chromatically descending on the G and the D strings there. Might be different on the guitar, but on the bass here, we're just doing it on the D and the G strings. But the point being that it's on 2 strings there, just chromatically working down, you know, pretty much as a finger pattern. Oops. Okay, so once again, it's not a scale, it's just using intervals for the sake of intervals, for the sound in there. So once again, we're looking at a tune that's pretty much minor at its core, but with lots of chromatic motion that exploit those intervals for the sounds they provide. This is similar to those older tunes that we looked at earlier that worked around a minor pentatonic scale, but with the addition of chromatic notes to give that blues quality. Here we're looking at a basic minor scale with the addition of chromatic notes to give that feeling of impending, you know, death, disease, and genital torture. So I hope that's shed a little light on how metal songs make use or don't make use of scales. At the end of the day, it's very much a case of throwing away the rulebook and leading with your ear. The attitude and heaviness of it all is much, much more important than trying to fit everything into some scale that you might have seen on the internet. So subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell and leave a comment. Also check out Talking Bass for hundreds more lessons on every bass topic imaginable. See you next week.